Okay, good afternoon and good morning. Welcome to the Asia-Pacific Research Center webinar series of fall 2022, entitled Asian Perspectives on the US-China Competition. Competition has become the dominant strategic paradigm in US-China relations, encompassing domains outside security and military affairs to include trade, infrastructure, technology, and development aid. How is the increasing rivalry between the world's two great powers influencing Asia? How do Asian nations, including Asian emerging powers, perceive the efforts by Washington and Beijing to define a zero-sum vision for the region? And how do they view and shape their futures beyond the US-China binary dynamics? Our fall 2022 webinar series explores these and other aspects of the fallout from great power competition across Asia. So join our lineup of esteemed scholars and experts in examining views from the ground of what the US-China competition means for the region. And you can see on the screen the lineup for the quarter. And our session today is the penultimate version, and we'll focus on Japan's perspectives on the US-China competition. And for that, we have two excellent speakers today from Japan. Well, their affiliation is in Japan. First, we have Professor Chisako Masuo, who is a professor at the Faculty of Social and Cultural Studies at Kyushu University. She's also an adjunct fellow at the Japan Institute of International Affairs. She has published widely on Chinese domestic politics, foreign and maritime policies, and international relations, foreign affairs for China. She has won a lot of accolades, including Nakasone Yasuhiro Award of Excellence in 2021. She has also worked with late Professor Ezra Vogel at Harvard Yenching Institute in 2014 and 15. And she writes both in English and Chinese and Japanese. The second speaker is Professor Ryo Sahashi, who is an associate professor of international relations at the Institute for Advanced Studies on Asia of the University of Tokyo. Dr. Sahashi actually is known at APAC by many, as he spent a couple of years here some time ago. He also specializes in international politics in East Asia, especially Chinese politics, US-China relations, and published a lot of books also, and he has a lot of affiliations, faculty fellow at Research Institute of Economy, Trade and Industry, visiting fellow of 21st Century Policy Institute, and so on. And this year, he's spending 8 months at the Wilson Center as a Japan scholar at that institution. So we would like to start with some opening remarks, thoughts by the two speakers. And I'd like to lay the foundation for our discussion. We had a lot happen in the last really month, both in China, in the United States, and US-China relations. We had the 20th Party Congress in mid-October from the 16th to the 22nd. We just had the US midterm election, whose outcomes were somewhat surprising for some people. And then we just had a Biden-Xi in-person meeting yesterday in Indonesia. So there are a lot of new events taking place, and we're very fortunate to try to sort of understand and digest what just happened and all the implications of these events for US-China competition, and especially for Japan, how all those events have been perceived and processed in Japan, leading to perhaps a changed approach, new approach, or maybe Japan might stay the course. So for all those topics, I'd like to turn to Professor Masuo first, and then to Professor Sahashi. So Masuo-san, please take it away.
Okay, Thank you so much for your very kind introduction. I'm very happy to be able to speak here today, especially right after Biden-Xi talk in Indonesia. So here first, I would like to share my slides. Can you see them? Great. Today, since I am pretty much focused on China, I would like to carry today's talk from the perspective of China studies. I'm also referring to the discussions we have in Japan on the US-China relations and also Sino-Japanese relations. Okay, so today Tsui Sensei gave us a question if Japan is caught in the middle between the United States and China. Probably it is caught in the middle in some way. But I think what we have today is the fear of abandonment from the United States, because as many people know, Japan is pretty much, of course, Japan locates very close to China. It's far away from the United States, but on the security perspective, Japan is pretty much relying on the United States. So, some people might think maybe because for this, divided reasons, Japan is caught in the middle. But actually, because Japan's fear on China is growing, has been growing over the last decade or so. I think many Japanese experts understand that we need the United States. But we also have worries on the United States. As everybody knows, Taiwan locates very close to Japan. And it was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi who visited Taiwan, and that triggered China's or Xi Jinping's upgrade, more aggressive behavior to upgrade his security position, military position surrounding Taiwan, and that really affects the Japanese. So Japan is very much worried about this situation. However, what we think, what we worry right now is that after seeing this, very friendly handshake between Biden and Xi Jinping, sometimes there are growing concerns from the Japanese side. Maybe for its own sake, the United States might take a very America-centric position in the future. And if China really takes over, tries to take over Taiwan, the US might go off. It can withdraw anytime for the sake of its own interests. So that kind of fear occurs repeatedly on the Japanese side. Well, let's see. Let's look back a little bit about the China's large-scale military drill in surrounding Taiwan in August. At that time, China shot 5 ballistic missiles into the Japanese EEZ here around this area. So, of course, the demarcation hasn't completed yet. So, this is the line of the EEZ Japan claims. Actually, it's an intermediate line between Japan and the other side. China also shot another missile here. Actually, this one was even closer to the Japanese territory, land territory, Yonaguni Island. Xi Jinping chose those places reportedly to tell Japan how the significance of intervention, Japan's intervention to Taiwan in future. But receiving those missiles, the Japanese side after August started to have more serious preparation for the Taiwan crisis. And some people even talk about Polandization of Japan. That means if China invades Taiwan, like Russia did to Ukraine, then Japan has to become the Poland for Taiwan. That means Japan has to become the logistic hub to save Taiwan. So I think Japanese government is working very seriously for this purpose. Of course, I don't think Japan would intervene to the Taiwan crisis militarily. But I think if you have come to Japan or Taiwan, it's very clear that people have very deep emotions to each other. So for the general Japanese people who are not interested in the international relations at all, even for those people, it's very important to keep Taiwan because it's a nice place and people just love Taiwan, and people just wish Taiwanese people to continue their regular life. So I think on the on the people basis, peoples to people exchange basis, many Japanese people wish to save Taiwan if something happens, and for that purpose, with that support, the government is also working very hard to think what they can do when the crisis happens right now. And that also includes some of the hard power preparation. As you can see in this slide, China has greatly increased its nuclear capability, and there is a huge power difference between China's missile capability and the United States. In terms of the intermediate and intercontinental range ballistic missiles, China has a lot. It has 278 missiles in this year, according to some reports, but the US has not because it receives some treaty restrictions. So Japan is very worried because those missiles can actually attack Taiwan and Okinawa if something attack Taiwan, Okinawa, and Yokosuka, American bases, if something happens. So this kind of worries is getting very serious in Japan. But that doesn't mean that we have completely exactly the same perception on China with the Americans. We have our own perception. You know, we regard China to be very threatening nowadays. Maybe not because we are competing for the hegemony of in the world, but it's more like our regional security perceptions. Not only about Taiwan, but we also have very difficult problems surrounding Senkaku Islands, for that, to protect our security interests, we need the United States. but sometimes we are also, we have been also bothered U.S. America first tendency, and so that's why we still have that's why we still have some fears of its own decisions and behaviors that can potentially harm our own interests. And I would like to mention here, I would like to emphasize here that many Japanese experts understand that today's the U.S. China competition is a systemic one between democracies and autocracies. That doesn't mean I also agree with this view, but I think many people understands that this is the systematic competition between the two different regime types. But because of that, I think many Japanese experts tend to get very much worried about the reactions of the developing countries toward the United States. Of course, Americans tend to highlight that we are the democracies and China is the autocracies. And I think many Japanese also do. But if the United States wants to create this type of, democratic, group of the countries, that might delineate many, autocratic or semi-democratic countries, developing countries, especially in the world. So when this kind of group competition becomes very severe, this tendency might make the America very unfavorable. And I think we recently we pay particular attention to China's how China is dealing or approaching to the developing countries. So I would like to talk about it a little bit. Now, Xi Jinping has chosen the new subordinates to create his regime. But if you see those members and some others near to the top, it is very clear that many of them have careers in policing or discipline area or in a security area, which the Chinese Communist Party used to control the people and also the many party members. And actually, I see this kind of, tendency to govern the people using the autocratic method is spreading toward the, for example, SCO, Shanghai Cooperation Organization. This is the picture taken in the Samarkand summit, SCO summit in September. There were some significance, very important things observed in this summit. First, China's centrality. Well, SCO has always been led by the two countries, China and Russia, but this time it was Xi Jinping who led the entire narratives. And also, I was personally very surprised, and I'm also very surprised that many international media didn't report this. But this time, China decided, or SCO decided, to expand regional anti-terrorism structure, which is a inside police cooperation structure set inside the SCO members, among the SCO members. And they've decided to expand it, this policing function, expand this policing structure into 4. And the a new headquarter will be set in Russia. It's a very scary thing, because they've decided to have closer cooperation to govern their own people the cooperation will be taken by those autocratic regimes, and they're going to cooperate, they're going to have international cooperation among those autocratic governments by using the policing activities. And also they've decided to expand the new type of infrastructure among those countries to control the internet, and also create the satellite observation network on the global level. And also they've decided to expand the membership and also the dialogue partner membership. So in this picture, you can see SCO is actually expanding into the Middle East, and also some South Asian countries, mostly autocratic countries. So that's about it. I think that's the difference. That's the difference. We Japanese experts find with the American side. We probably the way we see the US-China competition is a little bit different, because we understand Chinese behavior on the global sphere on a little bit different context. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I'd like to turn it over to Sahashi-san, but before that, I failed to mention that we welcome your questions of the audience, and there are already a few questions in the Q&A box, and if you have any, please go to the Q&A function of Zoom and register your questions, and I will try to integrate them as much as I can. So now, Sahashi-san, take it away.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, and it is always very happy to come back to APEC, this time by online, but APEC is where I spent a year back to 2014. So it is my joy to come back to the APEC podium. So let me share my slide. Don't be scared, I only have one slide. But before going into my points, let me respond to Masuo-san's point, because that was very interesting. The first one is Japan has some fear of Polandization. It is really timely to hear Polandization. As you know, Poland just got 2 missiles from Russia. So we are really surprised by that attack today. In reality, so Japan has that kind of fear, to get involved into Taiwan contingency. I don't think we have a strong expectation China might attack against Japanese national territory. I mean, like a Japanese main island. But we have some fear we might be get involved to some extent, like island defense and also maritime defense. So Polandization is a really good word. Another point I want to say something about Masuo's point is, she said we have some fear of abandonment. But that point, I have some disagreement. I think because for Japan, I think this is not a fear of entrapment, but I think many Japanese people start to feel we may have friendly fire from American China policy, like techno-nationalism or economic security, right? So, we have that kind of, cost we fear, in the time of US-China competition. But how about the fear of abandonment? Yes, we can argue there is, but I really don't feel such a big fear of abandonment on my side. So, but this could be a really good question to discuss in the later on among the panelists. So let me go to my original slide. Again, this is only 1-page slide. So first of all, updates. We just saw Xi Jinping's 3rd term, appointment as General Secretary, by Party Congress, but no surprise. I always say, if he couldn't do it, it is a big surprise. But this time, without any surprise, Xi will get his third term. Of course, the big surprise maybe is Hu Jintao's, behavior, or Hu Jintao's, how can I say, exit from the conference. But almost no surprise on that. US midterm election, I was surprised a little bit. Congratulations for Democrats. But anyway, so it was a big surprise. But I think if we have a kind of neutral or analytical view, what we can say is, before the US-China in-person summit this week, both leaders, Xi Jinping and Biden, got confidence in their domestic foundation or domestic power source, right? This is very important. And they smiled at each other in the summit in Indonesia. So I can say they should be very happy, right? Xi Jinping and Biden should be very happy, not only to have the summit itself, but also to have their victories. On US side, it's a kind of victory, but still, they should be very happy to have that political outcome in their domestic constituency. But I have some reservation on the, the outcome from the summit. Some people are really happy to see, oh, this is the beginning of the new US-China relationship. This could be some big pause on US-China competition. I really don't think so, right? And they have not reached any agreement between two countries. And also on China side, the big question is Taiwan and semiconductor. But on these two items, US didn't promise anything, right? So no, souvenir for Xi Jinping. So I'm really skeptical about the achievement. Biden-China policy overall, my comment and my analysis, it is really alliance-based architecture building. Really alliance-based. What I mean is Biden and the United States have really shortcomings in attracting other countries, which I say the countries in the middle, right? Like ASEAN, like Latin America, right? Or like even Pacific Islands, Biden are really good in having or enhancing alliance or alliance-based mechanism, like say TTC with between US and EU, for economic security. IPEF is of course having some non-ally members, but still the real core allies, US allies. So Biden administration try to pick up a new mechanism, try to create a new mechanism, but the foundation is allies. That is good. Okay, it's a strong points of the United States. China doesn't have good allies. That's weakness on China's side. But at the same time, I strongly believe Biden and the United States should attract more countries beyond ally, right, or alliance network. That is my point on China policy. And the second point is IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. It is, actually, I'm very critical on IPEF from last year to today. I sometimes scolded by some US officials on that. But, IPEF is still, IPEF is good. It's a tool for the economic security. Yes, for that matter, IPEF can work well. But for the real trade liberalizations, IPEF means nothing, right? It's just an excuse or just by time, for Biden administration. So, this is a good evidence. Biden is good on alliance, but not good on economic strategy or economic diplomacy. And many countries in Asia, including ASEAN, know this very well. And third point I want to say about Biden-China policy is weaker emphasis on ideology and human rights. It's good and bad, right? Trump administration was too much on ideology. Yes, it was not so good, right? But at the same time, Biden, in the beginning, they say human rights are really important. But please take a look at the last summit meeting and the U.S. government's a press release from White House. On human rights, just one sentence, meaning nothing, right? So, this is a big trouble for me. Biden promise they have emphasized on human rights in the very beginning, but in practice, no. Okay, next, Taiwan. Taiwan, United States still say keep one China policy. Okay, good. But in reality, its skeletonization is taking place. I'm not Chinese government official, but I really believe what the US is doing is skeletonization of one China policy. I think, Washington and Taiwan both actually doesn't care so much about diplomatic limitations, which United States kept last 40 years. That means, United States are really eager to enhance its diplomatic and military relationship and partnership with Taiwan, but still saying, this is still under one China policy. I sometimes feel some sympathy for Chinese officials, right? I'm just joking, but they couldn't believe this is one China policy, right? Because U.S.-Taiwan relationship is not something like 5 years ago. But I don't think this trend will be suspended by good U.S.-China relationship, even after this summit meeting. And Taiwan Policy Act, which Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs passed in last September. But the Taiwan Policy Act might be enacted into NDAA this year. That means, United States may do more about enhance Taiwan's own defense capability. And this is, Japan really welcome too. I was so critical, actually, on Nancy Pelosi's visit to Taiwan. And I was even cited by New York Times on that. And I was criticized by many Japanese folks on that position. But I'm really good on U.S.-Taiwan partnership on defense. But my concern is a very politicization of U.S.-Taiwan relations, like another House Speaker's visit to Taiwan. So this time by GOP's House Speaker. That is my concern. Finally, just let me conclude by 3 minutes on Japan's vision. As I implied already, Japan is now doing, enhancing our own capability and also appreciate U.S.-Japan alliance to deter the regional conflicts. From that perspective, we really welcome Quad and AP4. AP4 is Asia-Pacific 4, meaning Australia, Japan, New Zealand, and South Korea, which gathered in NATO summit this summer. Japan is really, fine. Even the most robust cooperation with South Korea, not only against North Korea, but also against China. We are really happy to do that. And also, Quad is fine, even though India is something tricky. If you ask me about the question of AUKUS and Japan's position, that is more debatable, right? But we really overall fine about the U.S. alliance network enhanced. But as I said, we really want to see more, U.S. Stronger position on the global south or the countries in the middle. But Japan also should do more in Asia, which I said we have to seek more dependability in Asia, which I make an argument in East Asia Forum by Australian National University this September. So please take a look if you have any interest on that. And Japan, like other countries, also very good and do a lot of things on high-level economic security. But like Taiwan, South Korea, and other countries, we have some fear for hard landing decoupling with China. This could be friendly fire, from United States on allies and partners, right? And we also have fear or doubt on US real intention of economic security policy. It could be techno-nationalism or economic nationalism. We still cannot be really assured about the US position on economic policy and economic liberalization. But I want to say, overall, our position is really aligned with the United States, and we don't have any serious policymakers' dream of creating bridge between two superpowers, US and China. That is, some very, retired prime minister say this idea sometimes, but this is not what we really think of in Japan now. Finally, I wrap up. Finally, I want to say, even though I describe my position on Taiwan and China policy overall, but I think we have to talk more about Korean Peninsula. North Korea, just recently shooted over 50 missiles, right, by once. So this is a big concern for Northeast Asia and for the world, right? Japanese government is now discussing about retaliation capability. You may want to say, oh, this is against China, but we also very serious about North Korea challenge, So, and for that sake, we really need more robust cooperation with South Korea and needless to say with the United States. So that's all from me at the beginning. So thank you very much for listening.
Wonderful, thank you, Sahashi, and thank you both for the excellent opening remarks. There was a lot, and I'm going to try to unpack some of the key issues. And we're already receiving a number of questions in the audience. Please keep them coming. So the fear of abandonment, that was kind of an underlying theme. Well, not underlying. It was a big major concern for Japanese foreign policy makers 10, 15 years ago, I think. And with Trump administration's strong policy against China, that concern seemed to have subsided. But I guess according to Masuo-san's observation, it seems to be coming back with, especially with the happy smiley face photo of the two leaders. And as Sahashi-san pointed out, both of them were probably, Biden and Xi, both of them were probably in a good mood as Xi consolidated his power domestically and Biden had a better than expected result from the midterm elections. But the symbolic meaning, apart from that, is there really a strong concern among Japanese observers and policymakers about the fear of abandonment, in the sense of, it's for the audience, the fear is that there will be some kind of G2 division of the Pacific, and China sees the western side of Pacific Ocean as its sphere of influence and as mostly what it likes to do, and US concedes that, and US will kind of stay on to the east side of the Pacific, or something like that. Is that a concern? And if so, in what way is Japan trying to address that, Masuo-san?
Okay, thank you so much. Probably, how should I say? The fear of abandonment is not that immediate, because at this moment, I think Japan doesn't have much choice, and for the moment, the United States is showing its well, Biden administration is showing its will to intervene in the Taiwan crisis if something happens. But we are also thinking about how to deal with China in the next several decades. And what we say, well, what we can see is that we are in a very unstable regional situations right now, and things can change, on upon a very small incidents. I think China is not sure. Chinese side, of course, there is a wish to reestablish its relations with the Western world. But at the same time, Xi Jinping's government is showing a very strong will to continue its control over its people and have complete security in its own territory, meaning that they are, I think, the government is trying to create some sort of wall around the autocracies and then block Western and American influence that penetrate into their own regime. But also, we are also paying, Japanese experts are also paying attention to the stability of Xi Jinping government. We think, well, we often regard that the power transition from Xi Jinping to the next leader will be extremely difficult. And when that happens, China can be very, very unstable and can be very offensive. And when the domestic politics is in turbulence, that can also take very aggressive behaviors over Taiwan, which will make the regional situations more and more tense and difficult. So in this course, we regard that the United States and China can, change, like they did during the Cold War, they can have, their own deal, and they can abandon our interests and Taiwan's interests as well. So, I think this kind of this sense of insecurity is probably very strong among Japan's experts on Taiwan issues as well, because we also hear a lot of complaints from the Taiwan side that U.S. is up-leveling its tensions with China. And China, because of that, China is taking more aggressive behaviors to them. But U.S. is actually not supporting Taiwan on the military basis. Well, their negotiations is not going very smooth, and they see different types of fear from the United States. So some of the Japanese experts also know that very well, and that's why we, in a long term, we have the fear of abandonment from the United States. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Sahashi-san, I want to get to Taiwan in a moment, but on this issue of fear of abandonment, I think there's still something to that argument, because Japan certainly doesn't want the United States and China to go to war and anything really any military action. But if China and the US become really cozy, become really friendly, Japan begins to worry. So there's a balance to be struck there. And how do Japanese observers and policymakers approach this issue of trying to kind of mend fences between the two countries if Japan can contribute in that regard? But at the same time, Japan doesn't necessarily want US and China to be completely on the same page, thus leading to sort of Japan passing kind of situation.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think the situation is totally different from like a Japan passing or Japan nothing moment, back to 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, right? Now, I think we are very confident US position on China is totally different from the past, right? So I really don't think, United States and China may have such a big deal or great bargain in coming years or so. Right? Of course, in the very long term, we have to prepare for the real detente moment, right, between two superpowers, like the Cold War between Soviet Union and United States. We have to expect, another detente moment like 1970s, right? That time, as you remember, maybe Japan was so upset, by the U.S. Soviet Union detente. But I think like this summit between Xi Jinping and Biden is never a detente moment or something like that. This is just a meeting between two superpowers leaders just to discuss how to avoid big conflict, military clash. So this is there is no appeasement, there is no compromise from each side on their own strong principles. So I think this is a little bit I can say easy answer to your question, but I don't think fear of abandonment can be real for Japan at this moment. So in the long run, we have to expect that.
Great. So now to Taiwan, and there's a question from Song Hyun Lee from the audience. Says it's interesting to hear for you. I think it's to Masuo-san, for you to say that Japan is unlikely to get involved militarily in case of Taiwan contingency. So then the sound bites from the Japanese government is exaggerating its level of commitment. So there's a lot of discussion about this issue. And recently my colleague, Oriana Mastro, made a pretty bold statement that there's a 100% chance that China will use some sort of force against Taiwan in the next 5 years. And another colleague of mine, Larry Diamond, says that Japan might be, likely is the most important, most critical variable that would determine the outcome of any Taiwan contingency. So there's a lot of eyes on Japan and what it is prepared to do, what it might do if a Taiwan contingency is to happen. So just to clarify, Masuo-san, the question is more about clarification on what you mean by that, or did you really intend to make that point? What is Japan prepared to do, and is Japan really not going to do anything military in the sense of moving its self-defense force if a Taiwan contingency takes place?
Thank you very much for Tsutsui Sensei to give me the chance for clarification. I said Japan is not going to intervene the Taiwan crisis militarily because we still have this constitutional limits. Japan it's a democratic country, and we follow the legal procedures in a very precise way. So still, with this very strong, it'll be very extremely difficult for Japan to intervene the Taiwan crisis militarily, or by sending the SDF to for example, Taiwan Strait when something happens. But that doesn't mean we cannot do anything when something happens. Of course, we will be the logistic hub for the United States, and it is also possible for Japan to, to support the Taiwanese government, well, maybe not the government directly, but the Taiwanese people by supporting the logistics when they, try to have some combats against the Chinese. So that kind of things are still possible. And also we still need to think about another issue that might complicate this situation. Some Japanese experts also argue that when China mobilizes its military on a large scale, it is also possible that for them to take over the Senkaku Islands. So those two crises might happen together. And I think the possibility is not that low. And in that case, in order to protect the Senkaku Islands and surrounding environment, SDF force might take some actions. And also China can fire missiles to Japan or the US bases in Japan. So, if you think about the details of how Taiwan crisis might happen, there are many chances for the Japan SDF to intervene the crisis in some way, but not directly to send the troops to the Taiwan crisis, but in many other ways. Thank you.
Sahashi-san, you have a two-finger. So
Yeah. I really concur, with Masuo-san. I don't think SDF will fight on the ground on Taiwan Island if something happens. I concur. I concur, right? So that is not my position and our position. But many, how can I say, misunderstanding on Japan's position still in the United States. Japan will fight on Taiwan Islands. No, we will not do that, I think. But at the same time, now the real focus is, first of all, is non-combatant evacuation operation, which we say NEO. That is, on Taiwan, we have less than 100,000, but we have, a few, maybe 20 or 30,000 Japanese at least on Taiwan Islands. And also many European, American people, foreigners also living in Taiwan. So if something happened, we have to evacuate these people fast. And that is really critical. And, and also Japanese government is now discussing a lot about that within the government and also with the United States and possibly with Taiwan side. And the second thing I want to add is, even though we will not fight boots on the ground, but I think in the contingency, we have to, like United States, Japan, and international society has to cheer up Taiwanese people to defend their territory. I mean, to defend their soil and forms, right? I mean, to cheer up, to keep their morale is really important. To protect the island. And for that sake, I think we have a lot of things to do.
Great. So I think, well, based on my conversations with American observers, what they expect, what they would like to see happen is not boots on the ground on the territory of Taiwan, but more like mobilizing maritime capabilities of Japan to contribute to the, and very quickly, the first 24, 48 hours be critical. So as Masuo-san pointed out, there are a lot of legal hurdles. My impression is that there have been a lot of war game type of simulation taking place in Japan, in the US, or collaboratively, and the Japanese side realizes those legal issues. So now I think they're working to, and the Abe, the legislation passed during the Abe administration, I think helps in that regard. So I try to explain to people about those legal hurdles, but maybe this is Sahashi-san. If there's an existential, kind of crisis on the part of not just the Japanese self-defense force, but also US forces, if US forces somehow get attacked, then Japan can actually activate its military self-defense capacity. Can you maybe give us a 2-minute summary of exactly what kind of situations would be able to trigger Japan's mobilization of its self-defense force?
In Taiwan contingency, right?
Taiwan contingency, yes.
I think what they might, of course, the first thing we will do is, of course, real area cooperation with United States, right? Backing up US logistics and also others, like medical things and also logistics or weaponry system even. But I think what you asked me is something more. Right, like by exercising our CSD, collective self-defense right. Of course, if that is applied, the real things, real possible scenario is Japan's SDF maritime cooperation with United States Navy. in the very close area to Taiwan Island. And there are so many actually different opinions on what we should do in this scenario. Some very hawkish, or I can say robust people, argue we will do all together with U.S. Navy, in the operation. But I still, don't think we have real conclusion how robust and how strong we have to work with the U.S. Navy, even by exercising CS, collective self-defense right.
Thank you. What's interesting about this topic is that I talked to American observers, and they're worried about Japan's commitment in case of Taiwan contingencies. And I talked to Japanese colleagues, and they're worried about American commitment to in the case of Taiwan contingencies.
Oh yeah, yeah. You are right, really. Tsui-san, because I really understand the American side fear on Japan, because the biggest barrier for Japan to exercise CS collective self-defense right, even after contingency happens, is Japanese domestic opinions, right? As Masuo-san said, most Japanese people love Taiwanese, right? And Taiwanese also love Japanese, right? But this is fine, but this is totally different from how Japanese people respond to real war situations, over Taiwan. And even government people in Tokyo are not so confident in having the whole society support for Taiwan contingency, right, to exercise all rights, or even supra legal rights, to defend, to participate in the Taiwan contingency. So domestic opinion in Japan is really tricky and difficult to read.
Yeah, Masuo-san had the two fingers.
Oh, yes. And actually, I think the Japanese government, even though many experts in the United States and also in Japan are very much worried about the situation surrounding Taiwan, and many Taiwanese too. But I think the real question is that there is no trilateral channel to discuss the issue. Japanese government doesn't have any official relations with the Taiwanese government. And I don't think Japan is involved in the security dialogue with the Taiwan and the United States so far. And so even though we have the same worries, and that might provide the common interest ground, but so far we haven't moved to prepare anything. So I think that's something to come in future, but I don't know if that will come earlier, or the crisis will come earlier. So everything is very vulnerable right now.
Yeah, great. This is a very important topic. We could spend more time, but I think we should move on to a different topic. I really agree with Sahashi-san that alliance-based architecture is important in the region to counter China's rise and ambitions. And United States approach, well, at least what used to seem like the United States approach of dividing democracies against autocracies, that might be counterproductive. And there was some encouraging sign in the new National Security Strategy document that just got released about a month ago, which gestured toward a more nuanced approach toward what we might see as non-democracies. And there's a question from the audience about, how do the United States and Japan, especially the United States, how does it attract countries beyond the allies? Well, even among allies, South Korea, the current president's administration seems to be more on board with U.S.-Japan alliance. But how does the United States go about doing more to bring countries, especially in Southeast Asia and South Asia, but Southeast Asia seems like a very critical region in countering China. What can the United States do more to help that process? And what can Japan do? Japan can probably make some unique contributions in this regard, given its relative popularity in the region. Can you speak to that issue? Masuo-san, maybe?
Oh, okay. But I have a slightly different view. I think, in my understanding, Southeast Asians are pretty much familiar in driving those, big countries. So, and they take pride on that. Of course, winning Southeast Asia might be very important, but I think we also need to understand that China is also expanding its sphere of influence, not only to Southeast Asia, but to the global society. They have proposed the Global Development Initiative and also Global Security Initiative. Xi Jinping government over the last year. And China is working very, very seriously to win the hearts and mind of those people, also by not only by providing economic interest, but also doing a lot of propaganda work, using a lot of SNS technology as well. And they are also using the satellites and those types of new infrastructure to influence the people in the global south, both economically and culturally. So I think China has already expanded its competition ground. So traditionally, it was only the Southeast Asia. Japan tried to work hard, especially on the maritime issues. I know Japan supported many coast guards in those areas to raise their capability to tackle with China. But I think the issue is not limited to that level anymore. So China, we really need to pay more attention to what China is doing in Middle East, Latin America, and Africa, and many other places in the world.
And China's appeal in that regard seems very...
Yeah, we are not sure if that will go smoothly or not. Many people also talk that Belt and Road Initiative is not succeeding anymore, and China has become more inner-looking. It has its own economic problems. So Belt and Road initiatives will not be that that powerful as we have seen before the pandemic. But so we see different economic mode, but still China is working very hard militarily and politically.
And it also seems like China is addressing some of the problems that have been pointed out regarding the Belt and Road Initiative, like what's being criticized as debt trap diplomacy. Now it seems to be upgrading some of the infrastructure investment and aid that is given to Southeast Asian countries. Is there a sign that China is moving in that direction?
To make a long story short, before the pandemic, I think Chinese experts were also serious enough to reflect what was wrong with the Belt and Road initiatives. And I saw many economic experts in China working hard to make it much better and make it much effective to improve the people's life who live in the developing countries. So they were serious, and that was sincere in some way. But then the pandemic happened, and also Xi Jinping became more anti-American through because of this semiconductor embargo against China. So I think we are facing different mode of China nowadays, and probably Xi Jinping government will keep the Belt and Road Initiative, logo, but what they would do under the scheme might be very different afterwards from now on.
Thank you. Sahashi-san, on the topic of alliance building and winning hearts and minds in the region.
Yeah, I have two things. The first one is, I think US should come back to the table of negotiation for economic liberalization, including TPP. what they are now doing is, of course, economic security, but also many countries, even in Japan, but many countries in ASEAN and in other parts of the world feel a sense of economic nationalism from the US side. And, what the US is now doing, government is now doing is subsidizing, the factory relocation back to the United States, like in semiconductor industry. So this is, totally what we have dreamed, in the last 30 years, with WTO and economic liberalization. Recently, I watched one webinar from some think tank, and that speaker said, after semiconductor regulations in October, US government senior officials say to him, one of the allies are really happy with this regulation. And they said our position is really same with the United States, and and even that senior official or commerce departments say to him that that government might have more restrictive barriers to China in semiconductor industry. I suspect that senior officials might imagine Japan, might imply Japanese official. But I want to say, this is never what Japanese government's official position, right? Or, Japanese industrial position. We have a very big fear on US, driving economic nationalism. Of course, we agree, a chance of, say, civil military fusion of the, sensitive technology in China. Yeah, that's all. That's fine. We have to protect our technologies. We have to keep our edge, competitiveness against China. Yes, it's all right. But, economic nationalism is totally different story. So this is the one thing, to attract a country, not only in global south, but also, from ally. That is very important. The second thing is, just very briefly, is unilateralism. Right? Like IPEF, when United States start to say IPEF, Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, many countries in Asia are out, right? This decision is somehow done by White House and some, very close network community in Biden administration. Okay, but, this is a things we have to talk, right? And of course, as you know, Japanese government and other government finally made big efforts to change US people's mindset, right? So increase the list of membership in IPEF. So, but the unilateral and very visionary, architecture building never help us to attract, global south.
Great. Your first point is a good segue to the question of economic security that we want to talk about. And there's a question from Dan Snyder about exactly what you mentioned, friendly fire from the US. And his question is specifically, what do Japanese firms and the government want in this regard in terms of restrictions on high technology kind of export that he's talking about. What do the Japanese actors want in this regard, and what are the tensions with the United States? What are the differences between American and Japanese corporations and government officials on this?
I think first of all, we have to specify which area we want to protect and which area we can do, without any restriction. Sometimes people say it's a high, small zone, small area and high fence, right? But that is a very important approach. And the second thing is, the speed should be coordinated with, partners, including Japan, right? Many decision is, done by, White House and Commerce Department, in Washington. But, we need more coordination beforehand, right? And the thirdly is now, many things is like to subsidize US farms and, some companies who try to come to the US from other countries. or regions, right? But I think we really need to have more matured idea of friend shore, right? So, U.S. partners and friends should be, more, should have more equal, opportunities in refurbishing our supply chain network. Now it looks like U.S. companies and U.S. laborers have a more advantageous position in economic security, and that is not fair.
I see. Yes, Masuo-san.
Thank you very much. I think this point might be a good reason for China to delineate more countries from the United States, because China, through this US-China trade war, China became more prepared for US offensive actions with regards to its economic relations with China. And they are, Chinese Xi Jinping government is preparing more and more for the decoupling already. So it's like it's becoming a premise for the Xi Jinping government. And I think within the Chinese government, there have been many officers and leaders who were arguing that we should have more friendly relationship with the United States, but it was the US side that made those people being criticized from Xi Jinping. And this time when he created this new regime, those people were all out. So, you can see there's a very clear international and domestic connection between the two sides. And I think Chinese side is now preparing to create its own economic bloc by making China itself to be the top. Because it really influences its own security issues. So China is working also hard to create its own supply chain, and it's trying to attract more and more countries to their side, not to the US side. So thank you.
Great. Thank you. Just quickly, Masuo-san, you mentioned the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, SCO, and how, well, SCO seems from the US-Japan side, like somewhat sinister international entity that is scheming to advance authoritarian kind of agenda. And what you talked about in terms of cooperation in the policing, areas of policing, kind of fits that image. But how powerful is that? How much collaboration goes on in that organization? I mean, the autocracies, their alliances might be more fragile because it's not legally based, right? It could be some countries come in, but they leave. In looking at the trajectory of SCO, is it growing bigger or smaller? And are they doing more or less? Can you speak to the nature of that organization?
Yeah, thank you. Well, SCO was established in 2001, and the nature of the organization has been changing. So at first, it was established, and it was more like a cooperation to work for anti-terrorism within the member countries. But over the years, it has been changing. This year, in June 15th, I think, when Xi Jinping celebrated his personal birthday, he called Putin, President Putin of Russia. And then so I think that was a very special telephone call to him, telling him that China can still support the support Russia in terms of some strategic issue, but China is decided to take the leadership of the global South. And then I think he, according to the records, he also informed Putin that China is working, China will work hard to re-establish the international order by emphasizing negotiations with the United Nations and SCO and also BRICS. So BRICS and SGO will be the two very important architectures for China to establish its friendship network or de facto alliance network, I think. And in terms of the SCO, we can see a very clear expansion of the organization after Xi Jinping took the power. They've been doing this information collaboration, digital collaboration among the countries, and they share the information of the criminals among those countries nowadays. And this type of, function that control for those governments to control their own people is expanding. And I think that's what we have seen in the last September summit. The SCO has decided to enlarge this function. And we can see that the membership is also expanding. Now Iran and also Belarus are applying for the full membership. And SCO is also using a dialogue partnership to enhance the negotiations with the Middle East and South Asia, including Myanmar, those countries. So actually, it's becoming more and more like a quasi-alliance network China is establishing. So it's not a military alliance, but it's more like regional integration of the policing or controlling people network of the autocracies. So it's a different type of regional integration we are seeing, I think. That's my understanding.
Thank you. It sounds like all the more reason for the United States to put more efforts into building its own alliance network in the region. So Sahashi-san mentioned North Korea, and we're not really talking about North Korea enough. People in Japan are, because there are missiles being shot in the direction of Japanese mainland. And Adam Liff from the audience talks about how we're not talking, I think Masuo-san mentioned Senkaku a couple of times, or maybe Sahashi-san too, but that's not the central focus when Japan talks about security issues regarding China today. And he's basically asking, why is that? So these couple of issues, I think, Masuo-san, did you have a two-finger on this? You can, no? Okay.
I only waved hand to Adam.
Okay.
Sorry.
So you can, each of you can talk a little bit, whichever topic you might want to focus on. Are those issues kind of overshadowed by very, very strong attention to Taiwan? And is that a problem? And also specifically on North Korea, does China have any leverage on North Korea anymore? Looking at what China does, what is Xi Jinping's approach to North Korea these days? Well, maybe Masuo-san can start with that question.
Okay, thank you very much. So for Adam's question, I think probably within the security experts dialogue in Japan, probably you are right. Taiwan issue is overshadowed. I mean, Senkaku issue is overshadowed by the Taiwan issue. However, we have different concerns over the Senkaku Islands. Well, there are new situations gradually happening after 2018, when the China's Central Military Commission took over the leadership of the Chinese Coast Guard. And nowadays, in the last 2 or 3 years, I think Chinese Coast Guard started to chase all the Japanese fishing vessels that come in to the territorial water surrounding Senkakus. So it's a very fragile situation we are facing. But in order not to provoke China, Japanese government so far has been very quiet about this issue. I think they don't want to have more they don't want to complicate the situations, but Japanese Coast Guards are very much concerned about this. And we also see China's maritime capability increasing. In East Asia, we haven't seen this yet, but in Southeast Asia, China is establishing a new type of infrastructure that goes under the water. So they are using that to observe probably the submarine activities of Australians and Americans, so they are, developing new type of technology to monitor our network, also by connecting its satellite capabilities. So we see this observation network on the sky and water, in the water, expanding quite rapidly. So there is that might gradually come into East China Sea. So the situation will be more favorable to China if that happens. So it's not that we have forgotten, but at this moment, people are more focused on Taiwan issues. And what was another question? Sorry.
North Korea?
What was North Korea? Oh, yeah. We don't know much about North Korea. We know so far the trade relationship between China and North Korea has been stopped for some years. But somehow North Korea has been, surviving, and they can shoot many missiles. So we also wonder why it can still do that. We don't know if China is actually supporting or not. Some people say it's because of Russia. We don't know. But I think China is happy about North Korea, about North Korean activities, aggressive activities against the Japanese and indirectly to the Western world, because right now Russia is caught in Ukraine, and China has been criticized. And so if North Korea carries that kind of activities, it's it's indirectly supporting China and Russia in a very unique way. That's China's understanding. So we don't know if there is a very strong, cooperation between the two countries, but indirectly, at least, North Korea is supporting China, and China must be very happy about it.
Sahashi, anything to add on this?
Just very briefly, first on Senkaku issue. Comments by Adam Riff, our friends. You are right. We haven't talked a lot about Senkaku issue tonight, because that is not our focus today. We talk about Japan's position between U.S. and China, and our security policy, in responding to U.S.-China competition. So we talk a little bit about the Senkaku possibility. Regarding the Taiwan contingency. But I think the Senkaku issue should be discussed with a framework more on Japan-China relationship. So this is the one thing. And the second thing is, you may hear a lot about Senkaku issue last 5 to 10 years old. Oh, yeah, that's right. Because that time, Japan's public engagement was totally on Senkaku, right? Washington people always say, we are really Senkaku fatigue. Right? But that was Japan's government position to emphasize Senkaku issue in security policy, right? That was that moment. That was just a historical things, very politicized things. So it is very natural for us to talk about Taiwan at this moment. So, but this never means, we are really guard off against China over Senkaku. Never. That is our territory, right? This is a territorial issue. We have no, position to appease on Senkaku issue. So please don't mix up the things. The second, on North Korea. On North Korea, yes, China-North Korean relationship is really key. And I always argue China should be, should be more cooperative for us on North Korean issue, using their own leverage, vis-a-vis Pyongyang. But the possibility is still very slim, right? Very unlikely to happen. But we have to keep saying that to Beijing. Second thing is, at the same time, I really think Pyongyang is not ready for talks, right? What they really do now is kind of brinkmanship diplomacy, we can argue, but I don't think they are really ready. I mean, Kim Jong-un is really ready for negotiation after his big failure in Hanoi just a few years ago, right? He is still recovering process from that damage. So I think what we can do is enhance our deterrence against North Korea, and at the same time, keep our efforts to Beijing for more cooperative stance against Pyongyang.
Great, thank you. We have to close, but I want to pose one last question, and I'd like you to answer, each of you to answer in a minute. What are you most concerned about in the U.S.-China competition in the coming few years, 5 years? And what can Japan do to address that possible problem between U.S. and China? Maybe I'll start with Masuo-san.
I'm the most concerned of Chinese domestic politics because we see the international situations is frequently reported, and if there are several countries involved, even if China doesn't talk about it, we can get information from the other side. So it's easier for us to understand China's rationale on the international level, but we don't know anything about China's domestic politics. And I think recently, including China's decision to carry the large-scale military drill surrounding Taiwan, China's domestic politics is the factor that decides its external behavior, and that's that we don't know anything about it. If we try to avoid instability that might occur from this reasoning, we should, of course, it's better for us to have more exchanges with the Chinese side, including especially with the Chinese leadership. So that's something we can work harder, I guess. Thanks.
Sahashi-san?
Yeah, for me, the biggest challenge is, my biggest concern is U.S. politics regarding Taiwan. So my advice to U.S. Policymakers, not in the government, maybe, but in the Capitol Hill, don't give excuse to China to exercise their, military force, use of force, right? So I just want to repeat what I said, this summer to many media in the United States and in Japan. Don't give excuse or reason for China to change the status quo, right? We have to invest to Taiwan defense capability. We have to prepare. We have to even have trilateral dialogues, as Masuo-san said, how to cope with the Taiwan contingency. But everything should be quietly, right? Don't give any excuse to China side and Xi Jinping. If we do that, maybe we can, manage the situation at least 5 years.
Great, thank you. We didn't plan it that way, but it was a very balanced response combined. That's perfect. Thank you so much for this engaging and very insightful session. Thank you for sharing your views and thoughts on those issues. Thank you to the audience for all the questions. Thank you, Kana-san, for your help. It was wonderful, and I hope next time we'll have you in person on campus at Stanford to have more discussions about this. These issues are not going to go away anytime soon, so we'll continue to hopefully have this dialogue. So thank you, Sahashi-san. Thank you, Masuo-san. We meet again.
Yep. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Thank you very much for listening.